Picture this. It's 2026. You walk into a grocery store. Same aisles, same shelves, same products, but the price tags? Unrecognizable. A loaf of bread, $40. A gallon of milk, $65. Your paycheck arrived yesterday. Already worthless. You try to withdraw cash from the ATM. The screen blinks. Daily limit reached. Try again tomorrow. But tomorrow never comes. Because the bank just froze your account. Not because you did anything wrong, but because the system collapsed. This isn't fiction. This isn't fear-mongering. This is the logical endpoint of a 70-year experiment that's about to end. And when it does, everything changes. The money in your wallet, the savings in your account, the retirement fund you've been building for decades, all of it is about to go through a reset. A financial reckoning so massive, so unavoidable, that governments are already preparing for it in secret. They're not telling you, but the signs, they're everywhere. And if you don't understand what's coming, you won't just lose money. You'll lose everything you thought was secure. So let me ask you this. If the system that holds your wealth, your future, your security, is built on a foundation that's crumbling, would you want to know? Or would you rather find out when it's too late? Before we go any further, if you want to stay ahead of what's coming, if you want to understand the hidden forces reshaping your financial future, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel is where you'll find the truth the mainstream won't tell you. Like this video if you're ready to see what's really happening. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think the system can survive another decade, or are we already too far gone? Let's start with something simple. Debt. Not your debt. Not my debt. The debt that nations carry. The debt that central banks pretend doesn't matter. The debt that's now so large, it can never be repaid. The United States alone? $34 trillion in debt. That's trillion, with a T. Japan. Over 260% of GDP. Their entire economy couldn't pay off their debt, even if they tried for decades. China. Officially low. Unofficially, nobody really knows. Because the numbers are hidden. The real debt buried in local governments, in state-owned enterprises, in shadow banking. But here's the thing. Debt isn't just a number. It's a promise. A promise that says, I will pay you back. But what happens when that promise becomes impossible to keep? What happens when the interest alone costs more than the entire economy can generate? You get a reset. Not by choice, by force. Because debt cycles don't end gracefully. They end violently. History proves this. Rome debased its currency to pay its debts. They mixed cheap metals with gold and silver coins. Made more money with less value. The result? Collapse. The empire fell, not from invasion alone, but from economic rot. Weimar Germany printed money to cover war reparations after World War I. The result? Hyperinflation so severe that people burned cash to stay warm. Because it was cheaper than buying firewood. A wheelbarrow full of money couldn't buy a loaf of bread. Zimbabwe tried the same thing in the 2000s. The result? $100 trillion bill that couldn't buy a bus ticket. People abandoned their own currency and started using US dollars. And now, we're watching the same pattern unfold on a global scale. The difference this time? It's not just one country. It's the entire system. Every major economy is drowning in debt. Every central bank is printing money to stay afloat. And every currency is racing to the bottom. This is what they call currency devaluation. But let's be honest. It's theft. Silent. Legal. Invisible. Your money loses value every single year. Not because you spent it poorly, but because they printed more of it. Inflation isn't a natural phenomenon. It's a policy. A deliberate choice made by central banks to reduce the weight of debt. And you're the one paying for it. Every time prices go up, every time your paycheck buys less, every time your savings shrink in real terms, you're funding the reset. You just don't realize it yet. The game is rigged, and you're playing with loaded dice. Now let's talk about the mechanics. How does a reset actually happen? There are three main pathways: hyperinflation, deflation, or restructuring. Let's start with hyperinflation. This is when a government prints so much money that the currency loses all value. It's fast, it's brutal, and it destroys the middle class overnight. Imagine waking up one day and your life savings can't buy a tank of gas. That's hyperinflation. It doesn't happen because of bad luck. It happens because of bad policy. When a government can't pay its debts, it has two choices: default or print. Defaulting means admitting failure. It means losing credibility. It means foreign investors flee. Bond markets collapse. Credit dries up. The government can't borrow anymore. So instead, they print and print and print until the currency becomes worthless. We've seen this in Venezuela, where doctors and engineers abandoned their professions to drive taxis because a month's salary couldn't buy a week's groceries. In Argentina, where people line up at exchange houses trying to convert pesos to dollars before their money evaporates. In Lebanon, where banks froze accounts and people rioted in the streets because their life savings vanished overnight. And now, the conditions are aligning in far larger economies. The warning signs are there. You just have to look. The second pathway, deflation. This is the opposite. Instead of too much money, there's too little. Credit freezes. Banks fail. Debt defaults cascade through the system. Businesses collapse. Unemployment skyrockets. And the economy contracts. This is what happened in the Great Depression. When banks failed, people lost everything. Not because they were reckless, but because the system broke. Banks had loaned out too much, invested poorly, and when people panicked and rushed to withdraw their money, the banks didn't have it. Deflation sounds less scary than hyperinflation, but it's just as deadly, because in deflation, cash is king. But nobody has any. Businesses can't get loans. Consumers can't spend. The economy grinds to a halt. And once it starts, it feeds on itself. Less spending means less production. Less production means more layoffs. More layoffs mean even less spending. It's a downward spiral, and breaking out of it requires radical action. The third pathway, restructuring. This is the controlled reset. Governments and central banks sit down and agree to change the rules. They cancel debts. They revalue currencies. They create a new system. It's what happened after World War II with the Bretton Woods Agreement. The major powers met in New Hampshire and redesigned the global financial system. The US dollar became the global reserve currency, backed by gold. Every other currency was pegged to the dollar. It worked for a while, until 1971, when Nixon ended the gold standard. He went on television and announced that the US would no longer convert dollars to gold. And suddenly, the dollar was backed by nothing except trust. Trust in the US government. Trust in the Federal Reserve. Trust in a system that could print unlimited money. And for 50 years, that trust held. But now, it's cracking, because trust isn't infinite. And once it's gone, it's almost impossible to get back. Let's talk about why. The dollar's dominance is under attack. Not from armies, not from weapons, but from economics. For decades, the US dollar has been the world's reserve currency. That means every country holds dollars. Every major transaction happens in dollars. Oil is priced in dollars. Gold is priced in dollars. Debt is issued in dollars. This gives the United States extraordinary power, because when you control the reserve currency, you control the global economy. You can print money and export inflation to the rest of the world. You can sanction countries and cut them off from the financial system. You can borrow endlessly because everyone needs your currency. It's an exorbitant privilege, and America has used it for decades. But that power, it's not permanent. And right now, it's being challenged by China, by Russia, by the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They're building a new system. A system that doesn't rely on the dollar. A system where trade happens in local currencies. A system where gold and commodities and digital currencies replace the dollar as the anchor. This isn't theory. It's happening right now. China and Russia are conducting trade in yuan and rubles, bypassing the dollar entirely. Saudi Arabia, the linchpin of the petrodollar system, is discussing oil sales in currencies other than the dollar. That's massive, because the petrodollar is what keeps the dollar dominant. Every country needs dollars to buy oil. But if oil can be purchased in other currencies, the demand for dollars drops. And when demand drops, value drops. The BRICS nations are creating their own payment systems to bypass SWIFT. SWIFT is the global messaging network that facilitates international transactions. It's dominated by the West, and it's been weaponized. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the West cut Russia off from SWIFT. It was supposed to cripple their economy, isolate them, force them to capitulate. But instead, it accelerated the move away from the dollar, because every country watching realized the same thing. If the US can weaponize the financial system, then holding dollars is a risk, a geopolitical risk. And so they're diversifying, buying gold, stockpiling commodities, building alternative systems. China is stockpiling grain. Russia is accumulating gold reserves. India is negotiating trade deals in rupees. And the more they move away from the dollar, the closer we get to the reset. Because when the world stops needing dollars, America loses its power. And when America loses its power, the system built around that power collapses. Here's the part most people don't understand. The reset isn't one event. It's a process. A slow, grinding collapse that feels normal, until suddenly it isn't. You see it in inflation. Prices go up gradually. 5% one year, 7% the next, then 10, then 20. And by the time people realize what's happening, it's already too late. The Federal Reserve tells you inflation is transitory, just temporary, a blip. But 2 years later, prices are still rising. And your grocery bill has doubled. Your rent has skyrocketed. Your healthcare costs are crushing you. But they tell you, the economy is fine. GDP is growing. The stock market is up. Unemployment is low. What they don't tell you, GDP growth is fueled by government spending, funded by printed money. The stock market is inflated by cheap credit and corporate buybacks. Unemployment is low because people are working 2 jobs just to survive. The numbers lie, but the reality, you feel it every day. You see it in interest rates. Central banks raise rates to fight inflation. The Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Bank of England, they all raise rates. But higher rates make debt more expensive. Governments can't afford to pay the interest. Companies that borrowed cheap money suddenly can't refinance. Homeowners with variable rate mortgages see their payments double. So they print more money, which causes more inflation, which requires higher rates. It's a death spiral. And once it starts, there's no way out. You can't raise rates high enough without crashing the economy. And you can't lower rates without exploding inflation. You're trapped. Damned if you do. Damned if you don't. You see it in bank failures. Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, First Republic, Credit Suisse. These weren't accidents. They were symptoms. Symptoms of a system under stress. A system that's over-leveraged, overextended, and running out of time. Silicon Valley Bank collapsed because they invested deposits in long-term bonds. When interest rates rose, those bonds lost value. And when depositors panicked, the bank couldn't pay them back. Credit Suisse, a 167-year-old institution, collapsed in days. Wiped out. Because confidence evaporated. And in banking, confidence is everything. You see it in geopolitical shifts. The wars. The sanctions. The alliances. Everything is connected. Because when the financial system is unstable, nations act out of desperation. They hoard resources. They secure trade routes. They prepare for a world where the old rules no longer apply. Russia invades Ukraine, partly to control grain exports and energy supplies. China threatens Taiwan because it produces 90% of the world's advanced semiconductors. The US imposes sanctions and tariffs, trying to maintain dominance. But every action creates a reaction, and the system becomes more fragile. So what does the reset actually look like? Let's wargame it. Scenario 1. Hyperinflation in the West. The Federal Reserve keeps printing money because they have no choice. The government keeps spending. Social Security, Medicare, defense, interest on the debt. It all adds up. And the only way to pay is to print. Inflation spirals out of control. 10% becomes 20. 20 becomes 50. Prices double every few months. Wages can't keep up. Employers can't afford raises. Workers quit. Businesses close. Savings evaporate. Everything you worked for, decades of discipline, gone. The middle class vanishes. People panic. They pull their money out of banks. They try to convert to physical assets, gold, silver, real estate. But the banks don't have the cash. Because modern banking is fractional reserve. They only keep a fraction of deposits on hand. The rest, loaned out, invested, leveraged. And when everyone wants their money at once, the system collapses. Bank runs, closures, bail-ins. That's when the government takes your deposits to save the bank. It sounds illegal. It sounds unconstitutional. But it's not. It's legal. It's already written into law. In the Dodd-Frank Act. Section 206. Look it up. And it's happened before. In Cyprus, in 2013, the government froze accounts and took a percentage of every deposit over a certain amount. People woke up and their money was gone. In Greece, capital controls. You couldn't withdraw more than 60 euros a day. Your money was trapped. And it will happen again. Because when the system is failing, governments protect the system, not you. Scenario 2. A new Bretton Woods. The major powers realize the current system is unsustainable. They sit down, G20 summit, behind closed doors, and they negotiate. They agree to create a new global currency. Maybe it's backed by a basket of commodities, gold, oil, rare earth minerals. Maybe it's digital, a central bank digital currency, issued by the IMF, controlled, monitored, programmable. They can see every transaction. They can freeze your account with a keystroke. They can impose negative interest rates, so your money loses value if you don't spend it. They can set expiration dates, so your money disappears if you don't use it fast enough. It's not freedom. It's surveillance. It's control. They cancel old debts, restructure economies, redistribute power. Some countries win. China gains influence. Russia secures its position. The US maintains some power, but not dominance. Others lose. Smaller nations get crushed. Emerging markets collapse. But the average person, you lose either way. Because resets don't happen without pain. Your savings get revalued at a fraction of what they were worth. Your purchasing power drops. Your wealth is transferred to those who saw it coming, to those who positioned themselves correctly, to those who hold real assets. Scenario 3. Fragmentation. No grand agreement. No coordinated reset. Just chaos. The world splits. The dollar zone. The yuan zone. The BRICS zone. Each with its own currency. Its own rules. Its own trade networks. Global trade slows. Supply chains break. Countries turn inward. Nationalism rises. Borders close. Tariffs multiply. And the era of globalization ends. This might sound extreme, but history is full of these moments. The Roman Empire fragmented. The Mongol Empire collapsed. The British Empire dissolved. Empires fall. Systems collapse. And new orders emerge from the chaos. The question isn't if, it's when, and how prepared you are. So who wins in a reset? Let's be clear. It's not the average person. It's not the saver. It's not the retiree on a fixed income. They get destroyed because their wealth is denominated in currency. And when currency loses value, they lose everything. The winners? Those who hold hard assets, gold, silver, real estate, commodities, things that have intrinsic value, things that can't be printed, things that survive currency collapse. Gold has been money for 5,000 years. Through empires and collapses, through wars and peace, through every financial crisis in history, it survived. Silver too. Real estate, if you own it outright, if you're not leveraged, if you can hold through the chaos. Productive assets, farmland that grows food, businesses that produce essentials, energy infrastructure. The winners are also the debtors. If you owe money in a currency that becomes worthless, your debt disappears. This is why governments love inflation. It erases their debt. $1 trillion debt today is nothing if the currency loses 90% of its value, but it also erases your savings. That's the trade-off. Governments win. You lose. The ultra-wealthy, they'll be fine. They always are. Because they don't hold cash. They hold assets, companies, land, resources, offshore accounts, diversified portfolios. And in a reset, assets get repriced, often in their favor, because they have access to information. They have connections. They know what's coming, and they position themselves before the crowd realizes. The losers? Everyone in the middle. The people who worked hard, saved diligently, played by the rules. They're the ones who get wiped out, because they trusted the system, and the system betrayed them. They kept their money in banks, in bonds, in pensions, denominated in a currency that evaporated. They believed the experts who said everything was fine. They believed the government would protect them. But the government protected itself and left them holding the bag. Let's get specific. What are the warning signs that the reset is near? First, watch the bond market. When bond yields spike and governments struggle to sell debt, that's a red flag. It means investors are losing confidence. They don't believe the government can pay them back. The UK saw this in 2022. Bond yields spiked. The pound collapsed. The government had to intervene. Japan is seeing it now. They've kept interest rates at zero for decades. But inflation is rising. And they can't raise rates without defaulting on their debt. They're trapped. Second, watch central bank behavior. When they start talking about digital currencies, pay attention. Because a central bank digital currency is the ultimate control mechanism. They can track every transaction. They know what you buy, where you spend, how much you save. They can freeze your account if they don't like your politics. They can impose negative interest rates to force you to spend. They can program your money to expire if you don't use it. It's not freedom. It's a digital prison. And they're building it right now. China already has it. The digital yuan. Fully tracked. Fully controlled. The European Central Bank is developing one. The Federal Reserve is exploring it. They call it innovation. But it's control. Third, watch gold. When central banks start buying gold in massive quantities, they're preparing. They know what's coming. And they're protecting themselves. China has been accumulating gold for years. Russia too. Poland. Hungary. Singapore. Even developing nations are buying gold. Why? Because they don't trust the dollar. They don't trust the system. And they're preparing for what comes next. You should too. Fourth, watch inflation. Real inflation. Not the manipulated CPI numbers the government publishes. Go to the grocery store. Look at the prices. Look at rents. Look at healthcare costs. Look at education. If your cost of living is rising faster than your income, you're already in the reset. You just don't realize it yet. The government says inflation is 3%. But your expenses went up 15%. Who's lying? Fifth, watch geopolitical tensions. When nations start breaking alliances, forming new blocs, engaging in resource wars, it's because they're preparing for a fractured world. A world where the old system no longer exists. The US and China are decoupling. Russia and Europe are splitting. The Middle East is realigning. Everyone is picking sides. Because they know the reset is coming. And they want to be on the winning side. Here's what they don't tell you. The reset is inevitable. Not because of one policy. Not because of one leader. But because of mathematics. Debt grows exponentially. Economies grow linearly. At some point, the gap becomes unbridgeable. You can't pay it back. You can't grow your way out. You can't tax your way out. The numbers don't work. And when that happens, the system resets. It's happened before. It will happen again. The only question is, how? And who pays the price? Right now, the pieces are moving into place. Central banks are trapped. They can't raise rates without crashing the economy. They can't lower rates without exploding inflation. They're out of tools. Out of options. Governments are desperate. Spending more than they take in. Borrowing more than they can repay. Printing more than the economy can absorb. And the global financial system is running on borrowed time. Literally. The entire system is built on debt. And debt has a reckoning. You can ignore it. You can hope it doesn't happen. You can trust the experts who say everything is fine. But those experts have been wrong before. They missed the 2008 crisis. They said the housing market was stable. They said the banks were solid. Until they weren't. They missed the dot-com bubble. They said valuations were justified. Until they crashed. There won't be a warning. One day, you'll go to the ATM. And it won't work. One day, you'll check your bank account. And it's frozen. One day, you'll go to the store. And prices have doubled overnight. And by then, it's too late. So what do? First, understand that cash is not safety. Cash is a liability. It's a claim on a system that's failing. Holding cash means holding debt, government debt, central bank promises. And when those promises break, your cash becomes worthless. Second, diversify out of purely financial assets. Stocks and bonds are paper. They're only valuable as long as the system holds. When the system breaks, they break with it. Look at what happened in Zimbabwe. The stock market went up, but in a worthless currency. You could be a millionaire and still starve. Third, own real things. Things you can touch. Things that have value, regardless of what currency exists. Gold and silver are the obvious ones. They've been money for 5,000 years. They'll still be money after the reset. But also consider productive assets. Land that grows food. Water rights. Energy sources. Skills that create value. A trade. A craft. Something you can do that people need. Networks that provide security. Community. Relationships. Because when the system fails, paper wealth disappears. But real skills, real assets, real relationships, those survive. Fourth, reduce your dependence on the system. The more you rely on banks, on government, on centralized infrastructure, the more vulnerable you are. Banks can freeze your account. Governments can impose capital controls. Supply chains can break. What happens when you can't access your money? When the grocery store shelves are empty? When the power grid fails? Build resilience. Build autonomy. Store food. Store water. Have backup plans. Build community. Because when the system fails, those are the things that matter. Fifth, educate yourself. Understand how money works. Understand debt cycles. Understand history. Because those who understand the game have a chance. Those who don't get played. Read about Weimar Germany. Read about Zimbabwe. Read about Argentina. Read about every hyperinflation, every currency collapse, every reset. They all follow the same pattern. And we're following it right now. Let's be real for a moment. None of this is comfortable. It's easier to believe everything will be fine. It's easier to trust the authorities. It's easier to assume the system will hold. Because facing the truth is scary. It means accepting that everything you've been told might be a lie. It means accepting that your savings might not be safe. It means accepting that the future might not be what you planned. But easy doesn't mean right. And hope is not a strategy. The evidence is overwhelming. The debt is unsustainable. 34 trillion in the US alone, and growing by trillions every year. The currency system is unstable. Every major currency is being debased. The dollar, the euro, the yen, the pound, all of them losing value. The geopolitical order is shifting. The American century is ending. The unipolar world is fracturing. New powers are rising. And the reset is coming. You can feel it in the rising prices, in the political chaos, in the social unrest, in the sense that something fundamental is breaking. And it is. This isn't doom and gloom. This is reality. A reality that most people refuse to see. Because seeing it requires action. And action requires courage. It's easier to scroll, to distract, to pretend. But pretending won't protect you. But here's the thing. Resets aren't the end. They're transitions. Painful. Yes. Chaotic. Absolutely. Devastating for those unprepared, but also inevitable. And on the other side, there's a new system, new rules, new winners, new opportunities. And if you understand what's happening, if you prepare, if you position yourself correctly, you don't have to be a victim. You can be one of the few who not only survives, but thrives. History shows this. After every collapse, there are people who emerge stronger, because they saw it coming. They prepared. They acted, while everyone else was paralyzed by normalcy bias. So let me bring this full circle. The coming reset isn't a conspiracy. It's not a theory. It's the logical conclusion of decades of reckless monetary policy, of unsustainable debt, of currency manipulation, of a global financial system built on a foundation of trust that's crumbling. And when it collapses, it will reshape everything. Your savings, your job, your investments, your country, your future, the lifestyle you've built, the retirement you've planned, the security you've assumed, all of it is at risk, not because you did anything wrong, but because the system is broken, and broken things eventually break completely. The only question is whether you see it coming, whether you prepare, or whether you get caught in the wreckage. Because history is clear. When systems reset, most people lose. They lose their savings. They lose their wealth. They lose their security. Because they trusted. They believed. They assumed someone would protect them. But no one did. But some people position themselves to win. They're not smarter. They're not luckier. They don't have insider information. They're just awake. They see the pattern. They understand the cycle. And they act. While everyone else is asleep. While everyone else is hoping. While everyone else is trusting. They prepare. So here's my challenge to you. Stop pretending everything is fine. Stop trusting that the system will protect you. Stop waiting for someone else to fix this. Because no one is coming to save you. The government, they're saving themselves. The banks, they're protecting their shareholders. The experts, they're covering their own positions. The cavalry isn't real. You are your own cavalry. And the time to act is now. Not next year. Not when things get worse. Not when the signs become undeniable. Before the ATM stops working. Before the banks freeze accounts. Before prices spiral out of control. Before the currency collapses. Before the reset becomes undeniable. You still have time. Not much, but enough. Enough to learn. Enough to prepare. Enough to position yourself. Enough to protect what matters. And when the reset comes, and it will, you'll be ready. You won't be caught off guard. You won't be a victim. You'll be one of the few who understood, who prepared, who survived, and maybe even thrived. This is the moment where you decide. Do you keep drifting, hoping for the best? Or do you take control and prepare for what's real? The information is here. The warning signs are clear. The tools are available. The choice is yours. But choose wisely, because this choice will determine your future. Whether you keep your wealth or lose it. Whether you maintain your security or watch it evaporate. Whether you thrive in the new system or get crushed by the old one. The reset is coming. That's not fear. That's fact. The only question is, will you be ready? If this video opened your eyes, if it made you think, if it gave you even a flicker of clarity about what's coming, don't let it end here. Subscribe to this channel, because what you just watched is only the beginning. There are deeper layers to this story, more connections to uncover, more truths the system doesn't want you to see. Hit that like button if you're ready to keep digging. Drop a comment and tell me, what will you do when the reset begins? Will you be ready, or will you be blindsided? The reset is coming. The only question is whether you'll see it, or become a casualty of it. Thank you for watching. Stay awake. Stay prepared. I'll see you in the next one.